This is Team 2 for the COVID impact on climate change and sustainability. Our videos kind of going to be in two chunks. The first is about our brainstorming session that we did. We used a product called Miro, which is basically an open collaborative whiteboard tool online, and did a mind mapping activity of starting with COVID-19 and then taking a look at what that does to the real estate as well as the people that are occupying those buildings. So we talked in kind of three major themes. The first theme was, what is the impact to the built environment, the actual buildings themselves and the design and the construction thereof. We talked about the operations of those buildings, so the existing buildings in place, what's the potential operating impact of COVID-19? And then lastly, we talked about the people that are occupying that building, because people habits are going to change dramatically as we get back into the workplace. So as we talked about the built environment itself, some major themes came about. We talked about how internal air quality standards, which have been at the forefront of a lot of the well building and fitwell standards that have been becoming much more commonplace over the past couple of years, that getting even a larger significance of focus as folks take a look at what's the proper ventilation, what's the proper filtration for the air that's coming into my space, and how is that translating to, not allowing the transmission of any airborne pathogens. The next activity that we looked at and potential impact from a built environment is the water usage within these buildings. As the water really ramps up because of cleaning requirements, there's going to be a much heavier load of water. So, how can we potential counterbalance that? When we started looking at the operations of the building, the big focus of the conversation, we called it single use everything. So much effort has been made recently in recent years to utilize more compostable products, to utilize actual silverware and plates in our lunchrooms, and to utilize our own cup when we go to fill up for coffee or fill up for water. And across the board, a lot of companies are abandoning all of that and going back to individually packaged plastic silverware, styrofoam cups, plastic cups. So, what's the impact that the single-use everything lifestyle that's been thrust back upon us? What's the impact of that? We look back at the people themselves and how, the people are going to be behaving differently. The biggest impact is working from home. There's the recent study that I saw from Colliers is calling out 35 to 40% of folks working from home through 2021. That's from 5 to 10% prior to COVID. So a massive increase in the amount of folks working from home. And what's that going to impact on our real estate? Potentially less real estate is going to be required for office buildings, and more folks are going to be working from home. So how does the corporate world going to support those folks working from home, as well as, pay attention to how the real estate's shrinking and the opportunity there from climate change? Anything you guys want to add on that?
Yeah, I just in the interim, I think it's going to be interesting to see if there's also, while long-term probably offsetting a decrease in demand for office space, if there's going to be in the interim, an increase in space from people who are going to need more space and less density. So what's going to happen to densification in the next couple of years, or certainly in the phases between now and 2021? Does it offset from the increased amount of people who work from home, and where does that evolve? Because I think it's going to be a very evolving situation, over the next 6 months, 6 years, and so on.
Our step one was kind of figuring out what those trends were, and then moving on to our step two, we focused on, okay, if real estate is shrinking and folks are working from home, the impact that climate change and companies' corporate sustainability policies is really dramatic. So as folks are reducing the amount of office space that we have and going from work from home, the CO2 and the water usage is still there. It's just being shifted for these corporations out of their big boxes to the individual employees. So I think that was one of the big ahas. Anna, do you want to add anything to that?
This was certainly one of the more creative aspects, and I think there's going to be a lot to figure out with regard to security and private information. But figuring out how you are going to, what your policy is on how you're going to be collecting data, what sort of data is going to be shared around that, and then certainly creating an incentive program is a creative way to approach the problem that I think will be beneficial beyond just the sustainability, but it'll also get you buy-in from your employees into your brand and have other benefits in addition to the sustainability and the environment. And
then the next item we talked about was on kind of the mechanical and plumbing systems, right? As I mentioned before, if the internal air quality standards become much more stringent, this is a perfect opportunity to not only upgrade your HVAC systems because of supporting IAQ standards, but don't lose focus that this is your perfect opportunity to upgrade your system because of sustainability. I think that was one of the common things that we talked about as we react to the COVID-19 impacts, to try to get in front of it, become more proactive, and don't lose sight of your other company goals as you scramble to prepare yourself for day one, and folks moving back into the office and then moving into kind of a day two sustainable situation. So keeping your eyes both open and not just becoming singularly focused was a very common theme. One of the other things we talked about is folks changing how they work and how they're going to be more working from home with commuting. Jackson, you want to kind of talk about what we discussed on the commuting side?
Yeah, I think on the commuting side, it's going to be pretty interesting to see what happens there. And I think that, best practices will be really reducing it when possible. Thinking, can this meeting be done virtually? Can this conference be held virtually? Do I need to get on a jet and fly across the country on a Tuesday to go meet with a client? Or can we do that over a video platform? And do we have the sufficient IT backup to make sure that, from the connectivity standpoint, that's going to go smoothly? So do we trust our systems in place? Do we have and feel like from a cultural perspective throughout industries that there's acceptance that's gaining for not just, okay, video calls work well when we're in a pandemic, but also thinking, well, once this immediate threat is passed, can we continue to leverage some of these technologies for maybe not the most critical meetings? If it's an extremely critical meeting where it really benefits for being in face-to-face, those will probably eventually continue to happen face-to-face. You've seen all the emissions being reduced and cleaner skies from the lack of travel. So looking for opportunities to continue that focus going forward.
And then the last major kind of theme that we discussed was the single-use everything and the massive increase of cleaning and the cleaning supplies associated with that. Ben, do you want to kind of highlight some of the major things we discussed there?
Sure. The two most important things, and I think the two pivotal changes that companies can make now, is to create a culture around sustainability, or that is inclusive of sustainability as a pivotal cultural element. And the other is to provide the right infrastructure for people to do the right thing. So you can't expect all of one and none of the other. It has to be a blend. So from a waste stream perspective and recycling, you need to make sure that you have the capability for people to properly waste and that they have common access to it. And then you need to teach them the right behaviors, encourage it, but creating a workplace and a home office type of environment with sustainability pointers and information access will be key to the success for